the model gap closing, my talk from last year? I think so. I think some developers are a little bit more aware of it now, maybe. So where before they might not have had a good top-down view of what their software architecture looked like, now maybe they have that, and now maybe they're looking at the code and they're realizing that there is a disparity between the two. So it might not be closing so much, but maybe people are more aware of it. So my talk this year was the lost art of software design, and the inspiration has basically come from everything I've done over the last sort of 10 plus years. I mean, over the last 10 plus years, I've been doing lots of workshops and working with organizations around the world and really teaching them about software architecture. And ironically, none of what I've been doing has actually changed that much. But what I am seeing is I'm seeing more and more organizations who have perhaps adopted that agile thing and maybe gone a bit too far. And although they may not have realized that a number of years ago, now they're starting to feel the pain. So they're accumulating lots of technical debt. They find it hard to onboard new staff into their teams. They find it hard to make changes to existing systems. You know, they kind of seen some of the perhaps chaotic effects that were unintended during the agile transformation. And really the inspiration of this talk is I want to get people thinking again. So we've gone from big design up front, which is unideal, to sometimes in many organizations, nothing at all, so no design up front. And I want to get people thinking about what's that sweet spot. So how can we do some upfront design? How can we make some of the more significant decisions just to give ourselves a better chance of success later? The one main thing I'd like people to take away from the talk is to go back to their teams and actually maybe draw some diagrams. So I'm a big proponent of diagrams. You've probably seen this tons of times before, but I like to use the diagrams as a visual checklist. So they're great for if you're doing a greenfield product or project, you can do a little bit of upfront design, sketch some ideas out, the diagrams from the C4 model, because they are asking you and encouraging you to put a little bit more detail in those diagrams. You have to go make some choices and really think through some of the low-level implementation details. Not super low, but some of the more key core implementation details. But if you have an existing system and you're trying to do the inspect and adapt, you're trying to add new features, again, the same thing applies. So really go back, look at your systems, try and do some diagramming, some documentation, and then use that as a basis for improvement. What do I hope that people take away from my talk this year? Really, it's about going back to their organizations and their teams and kind of maybe drawing some diagrams would be a good start. I know I love diagrams, but I think the diagrams are a great visual checklist. So this is great for you doing upfront design, sketch out some ideas, make some of the significant decisions. And because the C4 diagrams encourage you to maybe think through some of your design choices, you get to see quite quickly if stuff's not going to work or if it's going to work, and maybe if things need to be changed. If you have an existing system, an existing code base, you can still do the diagramming thing. Make sure you've got a good picture of where you are now and maybe where you want to go to in the future. So this is a great way to help you do inspect and adapt, architecture refactoring, architecture changes, that sort of thing. So my first job and my kind of journey towards being a crafts person. So my first job was for a really small consulting company here in London. When I was at university, I went for all of the interviews at all of the kind of big consulting companies, and they offered some interesting stuff, but it wasn't really for me. So I joined a nice small consulting company. I think I was employee number 30 or something. And literally within my first week, I was on a project team helping to build stuff. And because the teams were quite small, I got a lot of exposure to a lot of stuff quite quickly. So from my perspective, that's something I would not change. If I was doing this again, I would definitely go back and work for a small company, make sure I was getting some active involvement in things. In terms of the whole craftsperson journey, when you're on a small team, you can't afford to mess up. So you have to get very good at delivering decent quality systems in a relatively short time period. So again, I think all of that stuff really helped me. So what advice would I give my younger self? I think I would probably say fixate less on technologies and focus more on the underlying principles. The IT industry, the software industry is moving so fast. We've got new technologies coming and going in a matter of months or usually years. But although those things change, the underlying principles remain the same. And I think as an industry, we do a very poor job of teaching people those principles. So maybe that's what the advice would be. So how much knowledge should an engineer, developer know about architecture styles? I think early on in your career, there's no need to kind of really know that stuff because you're working within quite tight boundaries. You may be allocated small parts of a system or like a web page or a UI screen or something like that. So I think during the early stage of the career, that stuff's a little less important. I mean, important in the grand scheme of things, but as a single engineer / developer, it's less important. As you start taking ownership of parts of an overall system boundary, like a front-end application or a back-end application, or even as you move more into architecture roles, I think you need to be much more aware of the architectural styles. And the reason I say this is because it's all about trade-offs. So given that you need to achieve X, there are multiple ways you can do this, and knowing different types of architectural styles allows you to think through those decisions and really kind of look at the trade-offs between each of the different solutions. Gives you a broader set of tools in your toolbox. I think my view of software craftsmanship has not really changed so much over the last year since you folks interviewed me last time. I think, if anything, I'm seeing more people interested in it. I guess a lot of that is to do, Sandra's book's a bit more popular now, and Bob Martin kind of released some more stuff. So yeah, I've noticed when I go visit organizations, there's more buzz and people talk about craftsmanship. But in terms of what it means to me, I'm not sure that's changed. SE London is a nice conference for people to attend because you get a nice mix of speakers, and it's not like a Java conference or a .NET conference or a JavaScript conference. So you've got kind of lots of multi-language stuff going on. And certainly the talks I've been to so far today, obviously only day one, but they've all approached software development from a slightly high-level perspective. So Sandra's talk was about, product design and technical design, and my talk was about upfront design and architecture. Alberto's talk is about the same sorts of things. So yeah, you can see these same topics over and over again, and it's kind of a nice high-level perspective on software development, which I think we should do more of as an industry.